Good afternoon. Let me share with you how the program actually helped enhance, in one way or the other, whatever the Philippines has on climate finance decision-making tools. As you all know, the Philippines has been very vocal about climate change. We have been very active when it comes to climate change advocacies on having this GCF and direct access entities accreditation. We actually have several national documents and frameworks that actually line up the climate change mitigation and adaptation priorities of the country. So we have this National Framework Strategy on Climate Change, National Climate Change Action Plan, Philippine Development Plan. This is actually the administration's plan for the next 5 years. And then we also have an organization which actually pulls together all national government agencies to identify priorities for climate change adaptation and mitigation and disaster risk reduction. Then we have, with the World Bank support, we have this risk resiliency program, which has actually provided a significant amount of resources to be able to develop priorities for 28 provinces in the Philippines. And then we have this intended nationally determined contributions. However, when you look at these national frameworks and priorities, you will see and you will ask, what is actually the Philippines' priorities when it comes to climate change adaptation and mitigation? So there is actually no single document that actually rationalizes and consolidates all that the Philippines would like to do when it comes to climate change. We have no national climate financing strategy yet. So if, for example, if you are a donor or you are an international org which would actually like to help the Philippines when it comes to climate change, you'll have to look at these different documents and do stakeholder consultations to be actually be able to point out the interventions that you will be doing for the Philippines. Sadly, while we have been active when it comes to climate change, we actually have no national government agency which we can say that this is the national agency that is taking the lead when it comes to climate finance. Okay, so when Claudia, the global team, asked me to actually elaborate on the climate financing tools for the Philippines, I was like, what do we have? What do we really have? So the only tool that I think that I can consider is a climate finance tool that we have now is this climate change expenditure tagging. So this was actually a product of the World Bank's support on the conduct of climate public expenditure and institutional review. So after this review was conducted, the Department of Budget and Management, together with the Climate Change Commission, actually issued a law which mandated national government agencies, state universities and colleges, and government-owned and controlled organizations to actually track spending for climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies. Then, after a year, it actually prescribed all local government units to do the same. But take note that this is just tracking the climate change expenditures and not really looking at how much do we really need for climate change actions, and are we really trying to spend resources for the priorities that we have outlined. But we will see that I think this is already a good start because we're able to actually align the national spending with all these national frameworks and priorities. And it actually provided an opportunity for all these national government agencies to go into this program convergence budgeting. So right now, every year, the national government agencies are able to actually prioritize which climate change actions they would do together. Okay, so given where we are, the GCF Readiness Program support actually focused on two things when it comes to climate finance decision-making tools. We only started October of last year. So as you will note, the Philippines is one of the most delayed countries running this program. But we were actually able to establish this no objection procedure under the previous NDA, which was the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And then we were also able to actually develop and have the screening and evaluation tool adapted by the technical working group, which was composed of different national government agencies. And part of this tool is actually looking at the GCF investment criteria and providing local context to what the Philippines really needs. Ideally, we would have gone into the country programming first and then doing this screening and evaluation tool. But in the original work plan of the readiness program for the Philippines, the country program was not actually a part of our deliverables because during that time, the Philippines actually got the readiness support approved by GCF, but because of some institutional dynamics, it actually didn't push through. But with the National Steering Committee recognizing that we really need the country program to actually provide basis to how we will endorse the projects and how we will evaluate it, we were able to actually have it approved by the project board that we would like to have the country program as a deliverable for this project. So we started the country programming just last July. We were actually about to start it last March, but because of the NDE ship change, we decided to put this on hold. And we're done with all the stakeholder consultations that we originally planned. So we actually talked to all the national government agencies, private sector, development partners, CSOs, and academic institutions to ensure that we would be able to actually consider all the priorities of these sectors when it comes to climate change. So the first step was to actually see where we are, what do we have, and define the focus areas that the country programming will prioritize. We would actually like to have the country program not just for GCF, but also line up priorities, priority programs and activities for GEF, Adaptation Fund, and all the local funds that we have for climate change. And then we went into developing the portfolio. So what we did was to actually see where we are when it comes to the NDCs. The Philippines has actually submitted its indicative nationally determined contributions in 2015. And then we committed to submitting the NDCs this year. We have the NDC roadmap, but this NDC roadmap actually provides very broad strategic programs and not specific projects and activities that the Philippines will take to be able to actually achieve its commitments to the Paris Agreement. So what we did is to look at the NDCs and then look at all the priorities of the government which are unfunded but have actually gone through the vetting of the different stakeholders, and then have the development partners and CSOs agree on the priority projects that they will do for the Philippines. So right now, we're trying to consolidate all the results of the stakeholder consultations, and we hope that we will have a draft by the end of this month. So for the country program portfolio, this is actually the results of the stakeholder consultations that we conducted. You will see that a number of projects would actually be under the promotion of sustainable energy and transport, climate resilient frameworks, then resource and energy programs, then into adaptation, climate resilient ecosystems and communities, climate information services, and then we will have this green, sustainable, and livable cities, and then we will also have some projects for indigenous people and climate investment schemes and facilities. So lessons learned, number one, somebody should take the lead. So there should actually be a consensus among different national government agencies, whether it's DNR or DOF, Department of Finance or Climate Change Commission, which should actually take the lead when it comes to climate financing strategies, or maybe a technical working group, which is composed of different national government agencies. Then country programming should actually set the tone for more rationalized climate finance access. This will actually facilitate the decision-making process for the no objection procedure. Right now that we're doing the country programming process, we're actually thinking, where would the screening and evaluation tool come in? Because we actually developed the set to be able to identify projects for GCF, because during that time, we still didn't have the country program yet. So right now, we're looking at having this country program and then using the set for actually indicating minimum prerequisites for concept notes that will be endorsed to the GCF Secretariat. And then because one key objective of GCF is to enable countries to achieve their NDCs. So we should be able to actually consolidate all our priorities and have all the stakeholders reach a consensus. Okay. Also, we're recognizing that DAE should actually start serving as the frontliners. You will note that everybody wants to be involved when it comes to GCF. Now, compared with GEF, I think GCF is more political than Adaptation Fund, well, in the case of the Philippines, and GEF. So everybody is actually approaching the NDA. They would like to offer this project, especially the international orgs. So the international orgs are really aggressive, and if you're not that strong and you're the NDA, you'd actually say yes to every project that they will present. So right now, we're looking at actually trying to finish the country program first, versus saying yes to all these international orgs offering the NDA to do projects for them. Because we see that after the DAEs have actually gone through the accreditation process, which is actually very tedious and requires heavy resources, we would like to have these DAEs see the benefits of going through that process. So I think the international orgs would actually and should actually come in for projects that these DAEs cannot actually be able to manage. We've also learned that capacitating DAEs post-accreditation process is very critical. The accreditation process, actually, if you have all the documents that are needed by GCF, it's very structured. It's actually a boxed process. So if you have those, you will not actually have difficulties on complying. But I think the challenge will be more on after these DAEs have been accredited, are they able to actually develop projects? Are they actually able to implement the projects well and according to the GCF monitoring and evaluation requirements? And then key takeaway, DAE should have a good understanding of the country's priorities. As you will note, GCF actually puts emphasis on the fiduciary standards. And when you talk about fiduciary standards, most of those which will actually pass are the financial institutions. So because these are financial institutions and they're actually still more into getting profits from what they do, you will see that they still put importance on what will we get when we go into GCF project management. So there is actually the challenge of making them understand that this is more of doing actions, help, assistance for the government. Okay, a more programmatic approach of accessing climate financing sources, such as GCF, is needed. That's why we're doing the country programming now. And then on procedures, systems, and tools, number one, the design and implementation should withstand changing agencies taking the lead. So no matter who the agency is, the process should be able to actually be able to stand all this changing leadership, changing NDAs, so that it will actually have, we should be able to sustain the efforts that we have put in through the project. So tools need to be simple and user-friendly. So when we were developing the set, we actually just identified those that could be met by the proponents and those that could be assessed by the technical working group. And we actually decided that the most important stage where we can use the set is on the review of the concept notes. Because for the funding proposal, we see it important that we ensure that these minimum requirements are in the funding proposal, but we should actually be able to avoid duplicating what the GCF Secretariat would do for the review, or else we would be overanalyzing things and will not be able to submit a funding proposal. So that's why we recognize that there is actually no need to duplicate GCF work when it comes to reviewing the funding proposals, and just focus on the minimum prerequisites. Thank you.